Okay. Good evening, everyone. I am Ryan Toh from Project Eco-Wildcare, and I will be the moderator for today's panel discussion. We will proceed with the panel discussion immediately, so do follow us on Instagram to find out more about our project. The main theme of this panel discussion is being green in our genes. With rapid urbanization taking place all over the world, as well as lack of sustainable living habits, there will inevitably be damage caused to the environment and the biodiversity. We will need to develop healthy living habits to minimize the impact and to inculcate these eco values in the public to combat such impacts. Firstly, we will have Mr. Louis Ng, Chairman of the Government Parliamentary Committee for Sustainability and the Environment, to share. Mr. Ng, please tell us a bit about the kind of work you did with ACRES and what continues to inspire you to work for the betterment of the environment.
Hello. A very good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. Well, ACRES actually was started quite some time back now, almost 20 years ago. And that really was to inspire people to make a difference, to realize that their daily action and their lifestyle can have an impact on others, the animals, the planet. And through our years of work, we've rescued thousands of animals. Most importantly, we try and foster this change in mindset and make sure that everyone speaks up and makes an active difference. And I can see that over the last 2 decades, things are changing in a positive direction. I entered politics as well, and I've seen now that not just in the public arena things are changing, but in the government sector, the public sector, things are changing as well. And quite recently, we had our first ever motion about climate change in Parliament, and then subsequently we had launched the Green Plan as well. And that really is about how it's not just a whole of government approach, but really now a whole of society approach towards saving this planet. I won't have a presentation this evening, but I'll be glad to take any questions that you'll have during the Q&A session. But thank you so much for organizing this.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ng, for the insightful answer. We will be having Mr. Ng to come back for the Q&A dialogue session later. Introducing eco-friendly products through local businesses such as the Green Collective SG is another way we can develop healthy living habits to minimize the impact of our action on the environment. Mr. Singh, while the common belief seems to be that if anything, technology has enhanced the degradation of the environment, how have you successfully worked to bring technology to create a sustainable environment?
Thanks a lot, Ran. Thanks a lot for having me, and thanks a lot for organizing this great event. I'll answer your question directly and kind of move into talking a bit more about Green Collective and going into details of what we're trying to do. To answer your question on technology, and yes, there is a general belief that if we connect the whole world with the internet, it's a good thing. But like everything else, there are negative and positives that happen when we take an action. So the same thing is true about technology. And one of the things that we keep at the core of what we do is to kind of have certain values and philosophies while you use technology. And it came to the forefront as I was a part of a group called ICSA, which was basically trying to drive a manifesto for sustainable innovation. And what we realized over there is what is very important for us as entrepreneurs or as corporates or as investors is very important to actually have the right intentionality. Intentionality is actually at the core of what you are looking to do when you are building a business, starting a movement, an initiative, or trying to do something at home. And the intentionality of using the technology has to be positive. And what it meant in a Green Collective perspective is that when we think of technology, we think of it as how it would enable the green kakis or the small entrepreneurs that we are supporting, and how it can actually add on value to what they are doing so that we can get the message out to many more people. So on that note, I guess I'll go ahead with my presentation and talk a bit more about the Green Collective. So the Green Collective, as you can see, I call myself the inferior sex, which is a minority in Green Collective because I'm a male, and I'm very proud to say that we are around 98% female-run collective. We are actually Singapore's first collective concept, and I'll deep dive into it, what it means later, which brought a lot of sustainable brands, which were small sustainable brands, mostly individually run, onto the same platform. We are actually curated, we run, and big supporters personally of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which I'm guessing many of you are actually already aware of. Just to introduce myself, to take a step back, I originally am from India, been in Singapore for the last 8 years, and Southeast Asia in general has been home for the last 10 years. I started my career on the corporate side, worked in investment banking, agri firms, but over the last 4 to 5 years now, my focus has been on building ventures focused on sustainability. So building startups, advising startups, mentoring startups, as well as investing in a few of them. So that's what I personally do. And this is a good way of looking at what I actually want to achieve or what is my personal life purpose, where I focus on from my work, whether it is building Green Collective, being part of a corporate venture building firm, or taking part in corporate innovation related initiatives. My focus is how can we actually think about sustainability, impact measurement, which I find is very important to talk about, and use technology in order to scale the impact of these two things. So all the things that I do are focused on these three pillars. Coming back to Green Collective. So the Green Collective, and like the way we like to call Green Collective, is that we want to build a responsible compound in our little red dot. And that's been the mission of the company since we set it up 3 years back almost now. So 3 years back, when we set it up, the problem that we were looking to solve, or what we wanted to do, was that we wanted to make it easy for Singaporeans to adopt an eco-friendly and a socially conscious lifestyle. One thing that we all need to recognize and note over here is that being sustainable, whereas a lot of us actually know that it's important for the world and for the climate action to be taken, a lot of us actually fall short of it. So the question then comes about, how do we get people to get started on this journey? And that was a very simple mission statement that we had at the Green Collective, that how do we make adopting sustainability easy for people? So what we did was, there was 4 of us who got together, and then we were supported by a few more brands, and we set up a small little pop-up in Kinex Mall, which was called 1KM at that point in time, in the east, in Tanjong Katong. And from there on, starting with 4 brands, till date, we worked with over 100 plus brands. But what we bring to you is different, an alternate lifestyle. We are very clear, and personally, I always emphasize, is that we are not for overconsumption. So we are not trying to tell you that you should overconsume and keep buying. Buy what you need, but buy which is something which is more responsible, sustainable, and better for the planet. And that is the whole message that we want to convey. At the core of the Green Collective, and something which is different, which you might not notice when you go to our store today in Funan, is that we are actually a cooperative. So when you go to Funan and when you go to the cashier desk, the person that you meet is actually a brand owner. They're not a cashier who's working full time with us. So that's how the collective is actually run. All of us come together to collectively actually take the responsibility, and it's stemmed into the fact that the responsibility to save the world, to act on climate action, is a collective choice. It has to be a collective priority for each and every one of us. And that is what is at the core of the Green Collective as well. I talked to you about impact measurement, and that is something which is very integral to the Green Collective. So when a new brand comes in, what we do is that we actually align them with the UN SDG target, not just the goal. We go to the target level, and then from there on, we try to draw indicators for them, so that in the long run, what we want to showcase to you is that when you buy a product, what is the actual impact that you can do? This is a process for us, a long drawn process, because we have over 50 brands with us who have more than 7,000 products. So we are going through that journey, but we are very rapidly moving towards a stage where we will be soon able to actually show you the impact that you're able to create by your consumption. And it goes back all to the in the first hypothesis and the first measure that we had, that I talked to you about, that we need to be able to guide you on the journey. So the sustainable development goals for us personally was the choice that we took for impact measurement. The reason for that was because firstly, we wanted to be eco-conscious as well as socially responsible, and Sustainable Development Goals gives us a very concrete framework to be able to do that. Secondly, it's one of the most adopted and understood mechanisms in sustainability today in terms of a framework, and it gives our brands also much more leeway as well as providing exactness in terms of what they can do and what products they can or cannot sell. So in terms of how we help different brands is that we do retail and e-commerce. We also provide a lot of experiences to businesses as well as consumers through workshops. Of late, we are actually, for those of you living in the East, we actually started in Marine Parade Fair Price Finest in the NTUC. So we're working with NTUC to actually get a lot of products relevant from an impact perspective to Singapore out of the Green Collective family of products so that we can be much closer to people, going back to the vision of making it easier for people to adopt sustainability. And yes, the most important part, where we are not like a retailer, we actually provide a lot of advisory to the different brands that exist within Green Collective about how to do sales, as well as what price points, a lot of business logic that exists. So these are some of the few things that we do. In the pipeline is projects that would start next year, which will be about starting an academy for consumers as well as businesses. So those are some of the exciting projects that we'll be doing in the next 6 to 8 months as well. How do we actually do this is that what we want to do is we want entrepreneurs who want to take up sustainability as a choice of life and business to start with us and gradually go through the path. And that is how our business model is actually aligned as well. And what we do is through our business model and through the Green Collectives mechanism, we are able to scale up businesses, which actually are mostly micro social enterprises. And that is what we've been doing over the last 2 to 3 years and develop different concepts. So the Green Collective is the large format retail store that you will see in Funan. We also have the capsule concept, the Green Thinker, which you will see in a fair price. Plus, we work with other retailers and all in order to get these products to as many people as we can and as conveniently as we can. So yeah, over the last 3 years, we have developed a roster of over 10,000 products, impacted more than 100 sustainable brands locally in Singapore. And we've actually added revenue so that these sustainable brands can develop their teams, can actually develop their expertise, as well as scale their business, which is very, very important. Because for us as a for-profit social enterprise, it's very important that the social enterprises that we have are financially sustainable in order to achieve the aim of being businesses with purpose and being able to measure their impact and communicate their impact. So this is something that we track. Now, enough on the Green Collective side. A few quick thoughts on sustainability today and going back to the topic, which is green energies. One of the challenges with sustainability is that all of us have our own definitions and all of us have our own journeys. Someone starts with gardening and planting a herb plant. Someone else may start with a bamboo straw. Some other person might start by actually buying a sustainable fashion fabric or a piece of clothing. The journey is different for different people because the interpretation of sustainability is different for different people. And in this context, sometimes us as businesses, or whether small or large, we tend to interpret the needs of the consumers specifically very wrongly. And that is something that I always talk about when I talk about sustainability, not just from the point of view of businesses, but in individual lifestyle. And that's where the core value of inclusivity is very important for all of us to appreciate so that all of us can move forward in the same direction. I'll give you a quick example because when we talk in the world of sustainability, we keep thinking that sustainability is the biggest driver. However, if you look at research, it's not true. The data that you see on your screen is about plant-based meat, which many of you might be aware. For those who are not aware, plant-based meat is basically alternate meats which don't use animals in order to create a protein source, which is meat for us. There are a lot of these meats which are very popular these days, such as Impossible, Omni meats, and all. Now, plant-based meat is a great alternative because agriculture, as many of you would know, is one of the biggest contributors to the carbon emissions that we have, which is creating huge issues from climate change perspective. However, when you go down from a consumer level, and you can see in the chart, the biggest driver for people is actually curiosity, followed by health, and then you get to animal welfare and other factors. The reason I'm saying this, and which links to the other part, is when we talk about sustainability, a lot of us want to do good. If I was to stand in the middle of Raffles, especially when it was very busy during lunch hours in the pre-pandemic era, and shout out about how many of the people want to be sustainable, most people will raise their hands because the right intention is there. However, some of us are not able to adopt that lifestyle. This is the concept which is called virtue signaling, where many people actually want to do it, however, are not able to take that action. A very simple way to understand this is something that at least I go through a lot of times, especially if it's late nights. And that the thought that we want to wake up early, we want to learn something and have an ideal day. However, it doesn't kind of work out. Life doesn't plan out or pan out that way sometimes. And that is what is called the action intention gap. And this, as someone working with consumers, I've seen this as a big challenge that exists with consumers as well as businesses in order to be addressed. And this is something that I would urge, if there are business people around here or people looking to do projects, whether to do a non-profit or a for-profit route, this is a big problem that you need to address if you take any initiatives in the sustainability domain. Because what ends up happening is that you don't really know the actual impact and you don't really know your market research properly. I'll give you a quick example, which is from the UK, and 65% of the people wanted to buy purpose-driven or sustainable brands. However, if you look at the action that was taken, that is just 26%. Now, the challenge when you do these initiatives is that you will estimate the overall market size to be 65%. You will try to study your consumer. You will try to build the solutions based on the problem sets that you are facing. However, it should have been made only on the 26% who are actually willing to take that action. So these are some of the concepts in sustainability which I just wanted to bring forth because it's something that's not talked about a lot. And it's very important for all of us to know and appreciate and to actually act on. So I just want to wrap up the whole session by actually recommending a few things that all of us can take actions on. And taking action is, of course, the first one of it. Just to share a quick anecdote with you, I was in a Grab ride recently, and the Grab driver told me that he was quizzing with me, and I was telling him about Green Collective and what we're trying to do. And I was so happy to hear because he told me that his family had decided to leave meat for 3 days a week because their daughter was like, we have to start. So she took action. And it was so heartening to hear that because of that, the father, the parents, and everyone else in the family was actually educating themselves on sustainability. And we need the youth, we need at every level that we are at, actions to be taken because the talks can be done, methodologies can be put in. There's a lot of work being done, but till we at an individual level start taking action, it is very tough to combat the crisis that we are looking forward to. The second thing I would put is ask questions. Please ask the brands, where is the product coming from? Please ask Green Collective more questions. It is your right as the consumer, as someone who believes in this, to ask questions. Your questions make brands more alert. Your questions also make brands more responsible. But the onus actually does lie with you, and it would always lie with you. So don't think that you are alone. Your collective power actually means a huge deal. The third thing, and I always emphasize on this, please take small steps. It's a long journey. It's a marathon, not a 100-meter sprint sustainability, and a journey towards a reduced waste life. Take small steps, recognize it, celebrate it amongst your friends, and motivate others around you to do the same. a lot of small steps can actually lead to much more collective action. We need millions actually taking these small steps than thousands taking large steps, because the journey towards a more sustainable world would come with those million steps being taken. And that's very, very, very important going forward. And be inclusive. And that's the last takeaway for me. Please be inclusive, because sustainability should be for everyone. One of the most beautiful lines of the UN Sustainable Development Goals is that no one gets left behind, is the motto of the goals. Because if we don't design an inclusive world which is sustainable, a lot of the effort would not be worth it. We in Singapore are very privileged to be in the situation where we are, but a lot of the world is not. So be appreciative of people around you who actually might not be able to adopt it immediately. Be appreciative and supportive, and show them the path and show them the options that exist. We as a business are definitely trying to do that, but we really need you to start taking action and make sustainability and the dream towards having sustainable Singapore a reality. So on that note, I will just end the session, and I look forward to any questions that you have during the Q&A session. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Singh, for the interesting sharing. We will invite you back for the Q&A dialogue session later. Finally, recycling initiatives like Ms. Laura Lee's ToiletRollSG is another way to inculcate these eco-values in the public. Ms. Lee, while you are truly inspiring as an individual who believes no action is too small to have an impact on the environment, how important is it for the youth to take steps to appreciate and value the environment?
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura, and I'm 18 this year. So thank you for the question. I would say that the importance for anyone in society to take action cannot be quantified, and it's so significant. So it's not just about youth taking actions to value and appreciate the environment. But that being said, if there's one thing that is really special about youth, is that the strongest persuasive powers of a youth is his or her voice, story, and concrete action. Because when a youth starts to lead by example, it's likely to inspire others to follow suit as well. So without further ado, I'll be starting with my presentation. So do let me know if you can hear the audio of my slides. Okay, so today I'll be sharing the story of a Singaporean youth, and the title of the story is More Than a Toilet Roll. Okay, so just a brief introduction of who I am. I have been advocating for the environment for 3 years, so I started ToiletRollSG in 2018. And since then, I've been continuing my advocacy. Okay, so this is me on the Straits Times in article, amongst many youth representatives from Uganda, from Lebanon, from India and America. And all of us are actually trying to advocate for something. So this is me with the founder of Green Nudge. Okay, so an outline of what I'm going to cover today. First, I'll be covering the concept of ToiletRollSG. I think a lot of you will be a bit interested as to why did I call this initiative ToiletRollSG. And I'll be sharing the story of my youth advocacy journey in Singapore and also my social entrepreneurship journey. Okay, so without further ado, what exactly is ToiletRollSG? Whenever I give my talks, the first thing that I met with is a bout of laughter, because obviously the word ToiletRollSG can be quite hilarious. But on a more serious note, it is actually a national environmental initiative that aims to facilitate the collection of recyclable toilet rolls in Singapore. And the motto of ToiletRollSG is, we don't just do, we do good. Okay, so why toilet rolls? Why are we recycling toilet rolls? Why are we not recycling things like paper and plastic? Well, if we actually don't realize this, toilet rolls are actually made of only one material, which means they're actually one of the purest materials, which makes them a really good candidate for recycling actually. And ironically, we produce toilet rolls unknowingly on a daily basis. So we actually constantly produce this waste. And it has huge potential to be turned into more valuable products like paper envelopes. So where do toilet rolls go when we throw them into the recycling bin? Because toilet rolls are made of cardboard, it easily seeps into water, etc. And that makes it highly easily contaminated. And this is the way that our current economy actually works. It's actually a linear economy whereby we take our raw materials and we manufacture new products. After we use the products, we turn it into waste and then we incinerate, becomes carbon emissions, and that's when we pollute the environment. So obviously, this is not a very sustainable manner of pushing our economy forward because it is based on the assumption that we have infinite amounts of resources and also infinite amounts of capacity to handle all the waste that we produce. Okay, so this is the model that ToiletRollSG is trying to push across, but it's actually more than a circular economy. So we are turning something that we produce in the toilet, something that we look upon with disdain, like a toilet roll, and we turn it into something of greater economic value, basically turning trash into treasure. So we actually engage a subcontractor and they actually help to turn the toilet rolls into paper envelopes. Afterwards, we take the money and we donate it to support social causes in Singapore. So just recently, ToiletRollSG just donated our first sum to the National Kidney Foundation to provide quality and subsidized dialysis care for patients suffering from chronic kidney disease. Okay, so this is what we are trying to push across. Recycling is not just a circular economy. Recycling is a cycle of good. So we are always able to inject an innovative dimension into the realm of recycling in Singapore. So when I first started ToiletRollSG in 2018, I was 15 years old, and my goal was actually to recycle 1 ton of toilet rolls. So if you don't really know how much that is, that's about 1,000 kg of toilet rolls, and if you do the math, it's about 140,000 recyclable toilet rolls. I felt it was quite ambitious then, but today I think it's very heartening to share that ToiletRollSG has already collected 1.21 tons, and that amounts to about 170,000 recyclable toilet rolls, less in the incinerator. Okay, so when we push out environmental projects, it's definitely not just about advocacy, it's also not just about action. You need to have both A's put together because anyone can start their advocacy on social media. And it's very easy to be a keyboard warrior as well. So as part of my advocacy journey, I've been giving talks around Singapore in different schools, from primary schools, secondary schools, etc., to the public as well. And so the next thing I'm going to share is the brushstroke. So the story behind ToiletRollSG. So I just want to introduce this. I feel that it's quite an interesting quote. It's called, the Chinese use 2 brushstrokes to write the word crisis. So when we look at the word wei qi, we break it up into wei, which means danger, and qi hui, which means opportunity. So the message that I'm actually trying to bring across is that amidst every single crisis that you face, be it COVID-19, be it the skepticism that you face because of your age, there always lies unseen opportunities. Okay, so this was actually the first bag of toilet rolls that was donated by my vice principal then. And at that point of time, I really faced a lot of skepticism and doubt from the people around me, especially the adults that I approached for advice, because I was going to Sec 4 and we all know that it's a very academically heavy year. So definitely people would think that you might not be able to cope with a lot of stuff, especially if you have such an ambitious goal of 1 ton of toilet rolls. So another thing about actually concretizing your dreams is that you really need very hard skills also, and you need to be willing to learn. And so if you see the picture on the left, is actually a rough sketch of the original ToiletRollSG logo, and the one on the right is how it looks like now. So yeah. The next one, I think the next challenge I actually face is on collection. You really need to have a lot of logistics, a lot of manpower, etc., especially for the collection of the toilet rolls and the storage as well, because we know that toilet rolls can be flammable at times, so you need to store them at a very appropriate place as well. Yeah, so this was the picture in the middle is me and my team, Zero Waste Nanyang, when I was in Nanyang Girls High School back then, and I was very actually super fortunate to get a team of more than 80 members to support me in the collection of toilet rolls. Okay, so I think the next challenge is faced by all. I think besides MP Lewis or anyone pushing out any initiative, COVID-19 is going to be a big blow. And definitely it caused our collection numbers to dwindle as well. And a lot of physical talks also got cancelled. So from then on, I actually started to diversify my collections, and I started a new initiative called On a Roll, which is actually an Instagram live stream series where I interview inspirational social activists in Singapore to find out their struggles of pushing out new initiatives ground up. Because I feel that every single story by a social activist should be shared. Okay, so the next part I'll be talking about is social entrepreneurship. So when I first started ToiletRollSG, I actually sent out more than 30 emails to recycling companies in Singapore. And I received one reply after 2 months. And I didn't even know whether the reply was supposed to be good news or bad news, because the reply said, oh, the idea is so innovative, but you need to recycle a minimum bulk of 1 ton. And at that point of time, with all the skepticism and everything, all my academic commitments, I didn't even know whether I should be treading on this journey, especially as a youth, because I didn't know how much I was made of. And I also lacked the credentials back then. I was literally no one. So at that point of time, it really made me think that problem solving is a never-ending process. And that is actually just one part of the hurdle. Along the way in my ToiletRollSG journey, you will really meet with a lot of challenges. And when you solve one problem, it's going to bring another problem, and so forth. So it's like a cascade. So when you really want to concretize your ideas and your dreams, it's very important to have this resolve and that burning passion within you, such that any point of doubt or skepticism is insufficient to put you down. Okay, so the next thing I really want to share is about being humble and willing to learn new skills. I think along the way, I'm actually not a very tech-savvy person. I've been learning the ropes along the way, learning logo design, infographic design, video editing, etc., sketching, and also public speaking, because it really takes a lot of courage to stand on stage and hold the mic, especially if you're speaking to an audience who are so much older than you. Yeah, so especially if you are giving a speech in both languages, it is also really a test of your bilingualism as well. So you've really got to learn the ropes along the way and be humble to learn from other people who have been in the industry or the sector so much longer than you have been. Okay, so the next thing I really want to share is this map. As you can see, it's a global map, but what I see in this is actually the opportunities around the globe. So the point that I'm trying to make is that you might be a student, you might be 15 years of age, 16 years of age, or regardless of how old you are, as long as you have the audacity to dream and you complement your dreams with concrete action, you can actually reach these possibilities as well. So I'm not sure who I'm speaking to because I'm only able to see my slides here, but if there's any youth out there now who really has a concrete dream or really want to do something, not just for the environment, anything in Singapore, a social cause for good, and if you are really passionate about it, please concretize it. And if you really need someone to talk to, feel free to reach out to me. Okay, so along this journey, definitely it's also about putting yourself to the test, because when you start this journey, you never know what you're going to face. You don't know what are the problems you're going to face, and the people who will put you down along the way, especially the stumbling blocks that are going to be posed. So I think one thing that youth activists or youth environmentalists need to take note of is that age is just a number. And like I said just now during the Q&A, your strongest persuasive powers is your voice, your concrete action, and your story. So I think a lot of people ask me, how am I going to take this project forward? I'm taking my A-levels this year, so it's likely I'm going to be on a hiatus for about 1 or 2 months nearer to my A-levels. But definitely, if you're asking me what I want to do in the future, I will nicely encapsulate everything with the 5E pillar. So the first E is very obvious, it's the environment. So I will continue to advocate for the circular economy, and actually more than a circular economy, so that I can inject an innovative dimension into the realm of recycling in Singapore. Next is the economy, the circular economy. If I'm able to diversify the products that I'm going to recycle besides toilet rolls, which is literally just an emblem to show that something that you produce in a toilet roll can be turned into something so much more economically valuable, then I'll definitely go with it. So the next E is entertainment. So along my advocacy journey, as much as I talked about a lot of the challenges I faced along the way, there have also been many, I would say, unexpected opportunities. So I was giving my speech and I actually met Sylvia Ng, who is actually the co-founder of Night Owl Cinematics, NOC, and I actually managed to share my project with her. And I was very heartened that she was very encouraging. And so if I really had the opportunity, I really want to work with some celebrities or people from NOC to, I would say, inject an entertaining element into the realm of recycling so that it's not something that is seen as very boring or dull when actually the public is not very receptive towards this idea. And the fourth E would be enterprising. So it's really about being innovative and having the audacity to dream, but it has to be grounded in reality as well. And the last E, I will just put them as two E's, is ethical and honesty, because they kind of convey the same idea. It is always about showing your sincerity when you approach people for help and knowing that there are so many people whom you can learn from along this way. Okay, so with that, I've come to the end of my presentation. And if you want to catch up with me or what ToiletRollSG is actually doing, feel free to follow us on our Instagram page and ask me questions during the Q&A later. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lee, for the presentation. We will now proceed with the Q&A dialogue session, where Ryan Lim will take over.
Okay, so now we'll be moving on to the Q&A session. So yeah, again, a reminder, if you have any questions for any of the three speakers, please feel free to leave your questions in the comments below. Okay, so here we have a question from, so he would like to ask, how do initiatives like Straw-Free Singapore and ToiletRollSG contribute to raising awareness about the destructive impact of man's actions on the environment? So would any of you like to answer this question?
I'm going to assume that the question is for me because
Yes.
Okay, so I think contrary to popular belief, I would say that the most powerful thing about these initiatives is that they are youth-driven. And because they are youth-driven, it's likely to inspire a lot of youth to follow suit as well. And I think one thing that I faced along my journey is that as much as I faced a lot of skepticism along the way, when adults approach me and they say, wow, you are 16, you are skipping lessons, okay, but with leave of absence, to give talks about the environment and the circular economy, I think it really heartens me because I feel that they do get influenced to a certain extent. And I have actually met with a lot of members of the public who approach me and say, hi, young individual, how can I actually support you in this initiative? How can I contribute to your collections as well? So I think the main part of these initiatives in raising awareness is actually the power of youth advocacy. Yeah.
Mr. Mayur, Mr. Ng, do you have anything to add?
I guess that's the importance of the collective effort. So every little bit counts. You know, there's always talk that it's just one straw or perhaps one toilet roll doesn't make much of a difference. But if everybody starts doing it, little bit by little bit, things will start to change, and probably won't happen overnight. But in the very short term or near future, I think if everybody starts doing it, it will result in a huge change for this planet. And I see it already. I mean, there are more and more youth wanting to speak up on these issues. That's a positive sign.
No, definitely. I mean, just to add on to what Minister said and Nora, it's very important for many more of these initiatives to come. Like what Laura is doing, it's so impressive, Laura, to say this, because it's actually heartening. Because as entrepreneurs who are much older, there's so much we can learn from you. And one thing that I always say, and having built startups in sustainability in Singapore and Europe, where there's a different understanding, two markets which have different understanding of sustainability. One thing I can tell you for sure is the youth, which is the most concerned about sustainability, because as you age, you will see more closely what is happening with climate action. So, or climate change, right? So that's why the concern comes from, and it's a genuine concern for most of the people. And initiatives like Straw-Free Singapore, toilet rolls, honestly, they build the building blocks of awareness, right? And that has to be done by many, many, many more of us at a macro level, which is what Minister and other people are leading, and then at a micro and a community level, which is what all of us need to do. So it's a no-brainer that this is required. And I think, Laura, what you said was very right. A lot of us get impressed every time we see a youth doing it, talking about changing choices. And I think I gave the example of the person, the Grab driver that I met. And the change is very simple, right? And maybe his daughter had attended one of the talks or saw some Insta Live session from Laura, right? So you just need one spark, and that spark can cause a huge change.
So now we move on to the next question. So someone would like to ask, how can businesses be incentivized to be environmentally sustainable? So can we get them to be on board with being environmentally sustainable, since alternative materials are usually more expensive? So anyone like to comment on this question?
Social enterprise, we have to answer this one, man.
I'll start with this. Maybe I'll start with this first. So actually, yes, I think I get this question a lot. I'll start with the second part of the question. So as someone who studied economics, I would say that it's expensive because you are not factoring in the actual cost of making a plastic product, right? So the externalities and the problems and the cost it causes to the environment is not factored in. But having said that, that's in real life a theoretical argument. However, the way the world is moving today is that we are looking at carbon cost or the carbon emission cost getting charged to businesses over a period of time. So for the emissions that they cause, they will have to pay. So the world is moving towards a place where these two products in principle will start converging. But to give you one actual example without going into too much theory on the difference of the pricing, and this was actually not calculated by us, but by an influencer who supports us. And you'll be surprised, one of the biggest selling products in Green Collective is actually menstrual cups, because everyone thinks it's straws or bottle. Menstrual cup is actually the biggest selling products. And to everyone, and I think Laura, you pointed out rightly that during COVID, single-use plastic and everything consumption increased. Actually, menstrual cup consumption also increased because people were at home, so they were more willing to try out new products. Now, menstrual cup actually saves you $1,000 over a period of 3 years. So if you do a full circle analysis, you might find a lot of the sustainable products actually tend to be cheaper. And you have to look at it from that perspective. A lot of the products are actually on the first stage of development. So technology, like anything else, takes a curve, and then the costs actually come down, which will happen over a period of time. Going back to the first question, how can businesses be incentivized to be environmentally sustainable? In today's day and date, actually, I don't think it's a choice anymore. It's not a choice for a large business or a small business to be environmentally sustainable. You have to focus on it. The way the green plan is working, the way investors are looking at ESG criteria, which is environmental, social, and governance principles, it's no more a choice, actually. I was just reading something on Facebook that Cristiano Ronaldo said something about Coke, because of which Coke's stock has actually fallen a lot. And it was on the environmental policies or something like that. So these things are going to become much more pronounced as we move ahead in our society. So it's not a choice to be environmentally sustainable. So it's become the new norm. On top of that, the reason businesses need to become environmentally sustainable is because the consumer is asking them to. And that is where I believe in the power of collective action, the power of youth, because the businesses are designed in order to serve a customer or a consumer. And if 85% of the people start saying that we want to see transparency in supply chain, we want to see eco-friendly products, the business does not have a choice. They will have to start actually yielding to what the customer demands. So all of these are actually market forces, and it's not coming out of anyone's goodwill, actually. And all of it is happening at a very, very rapid pace. So that's how I would answer that.
Okay, so
Maybe, I'll add in the broader picture. The government now is using the carrot and the stick. So, with our legislation, our Carbon Pricing Act, which is really about collecting taxes on the amount of carbon emission. So that's the stick, where, as we have announced, next year we'll announce some increase in the carbon tax as well, where the more you emit, the more you're going to have to pay. But at the same time, there's the carrot, which is that the funds that we collect from the carbon tax, it can be used in terms of grants for companies to green their processes. So that way, it goes sort of a full circle, where we're trying to use the money we generate from pollution to try and green to lessen the emissions. And I think, as we see it now, a lot of companies in our dialogue sessions are really telling us they are going green already, because that is what the consumers want now. The consumers are asking for it. And if you see some of the dialogues we have ExxonMobil coming on board. Those obviously are probably the largest emitters in Singapore, the petrochemical sector. But even they are looking towards going green. So again, I'm very optimistic that we're heading in the right direction. Government policies will step in. But very importantly, I think it's the people sector that is bringing about this massive change in our society.
Yeah.
Soon will be her turn.
To just add a point, I think it's a wave that is inevitable. We just got to face it, and I don't think it's something bad. In fact, I'm looking upon it with a very positive light, because now I think deviating a bit from the question, even renewable energy is getting cheaper and cheaper. And we have things like green finance, the circular economy, even Industry 4.0 is going to be more green and sustainable, where you look at more energy efficient practices as well. And along with what both of you have mentioned about the dollar vote, I think that's something that's really powerful as well. Yeah.
okay, so I think leading into the next question, for Mr. Ng, so what are some initiatives that the government has come up to protect the environment in Singapore, other than the ones that you've mentioned before already?
So it really is all encapsulated in the green plan that we announced a couple of months back during our budget debates. And that really is not just, as I always stress, very importantly, not just a whole of government approach, but as we've rightly put it now, it's a whole of society approach, which is really how we can get everyone on board. And the green plan really I like it a lot because it sets very near-term targets. So, instead of us talking about the second half of this century, which for some people is really long, now we're saying within the next 9 years, these are our plans to reduce emissions, to have net zero emission schools, the whole deal, all into one plan. And now, I guess the next few months towards the next budget is really to get buy-in from people, so that we can get everyone to understand why we need a green plan and how we need to implement it. At the same time, I think we're responding to a lot of very good feedback that the lower income must not be left behind. As we already said, we have to be inclusive, and that's why we launched some of the voucher scheme to make sure that the lower income are also climate ready. They can buy some of the more energy efficient appliances with some of the rebates or vouchers that we've given out. But it will probably take some time. As I said, the green plan is really quite comprehensive. And that's been one of the problems of the green plan. There's just so many targets that nobody wants to read this huge document or even watch the video that explains the whole green plan. But again, that's our task now over the next few months this year, to try and bring this across to the general public. Of course, upcoming we have our public consultation on the single-use disposable bag charge as well. That we worked on. I worked on it for quite some time now, and finally, we are going to implement it. So consultations will start soon, where again we will get some feedback from the public, but also make sure that the measures don't impact the lower income too significantly. It's exciting time. There's so much more to say. The extended producer responsibility kicks in actually in a couple of weeks' time. So all the electronic waste, something that I've spoken up in Parliament for 6 years now, because everybody gets a phone, throws away, and nobody recycles it. Over 90% is not recycled. So finally, in a few weeks' time, it is going to be sort of mandated, where the manufacturers will have to make sure they help to recycle and collect back these products. And that's why I'm optimistic. I've always said that. I've spoken about this in Parliament for quite a few years now, and this few months, I've seen a lot of positive changes. And more young people that make me feel very old now. When I started, some people wasn't even born yet. That scares me to death. Now when I go back to NUS for talks, I realize when I was as an undergrad there, they weren't even born yet. So
I think the only thing I'll add to that is the SG Eco Fund, which for a lot of social enterprises as well as the communities was a great way to kickstart a lot of initiatives, which in general was very tough to find funding for in Singapore earlier. We did not have any actual mechanism or funding mechanism of starting something because private investors cannot fund it. You don't want your salary to fund it. So that I think was a great idea, and it has led to and kickstarted a lot of things from players who wanted to do things, but you cannot justify sometimes the commercial viability of it. So I think as initiatives like SG Eco Fund are very important to have to kickstart movements. And I think what Mr. is talking about, I think everyone thinks 2030 and 2050 are very far away. So the way I talk about is 2030 is as far away as 2012 is. So I think that gives people a lot of perspective. And similarly, if you talk to people about how far 2050 is, and maybe this is a very younger audience again, Mr. India, but if you take them back to what you were doing in 2012, which many people would remember, and 2030 is that far away, so then people realize the urgency of it.
If I were to add something, I think today's panel is really interesting and diverse because we've got government, we've got business, and we've also got students. And I participated in the SG Youth Action Challenge a few years back, and I think that's one of the government initiatives which I really truly benefited from. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who has benefited from this because, firstly, it really shows what the youth in Singapore today care about, and it really gives us a platform as well as very appropriate and fruitful mentorship to push our initiatives forward as well. And many initiatives actually, they are being supported financially as well, and also with a lot of mentorship. And we know that to push an initiative forward is not just about having the resources, it's also about having that wealth of knowledge to have people to guide you along the way as well. So I think a lot of initiatives by the government to support youth initiatives has actually been very good and meaningful as well. Yeah, not just in the protection of the environment, a lot of other sectors as well, but there's definitely the environmental pillar. Yeah.
did you all apply for the SG Eco Fund and got it?
No.
Us?
No? Okay. Because I applied and I didn't get it. That's why I didn't mention it.
No, I also applied. We didn't get it. We're supporting.
Okay,
we're supporting a few other.
not fair. I didn't get it, so I wouldn't talk about it anymore.
No, but Nora, what you talked about is very interesting because I work very closely with SCAPE and National Youth Council. And what was interesting to see is a lot of National Youth Council competitions and other things this year are solely focused on sustainable development goals. And for the benefit of everyone, sustainability is a very wide topic. It's not limited to straws and toilet rolls. What we all are doing is very small portion. And I think what Minister has on his plate is much wider than that. So like on e-waste, one of the most interesting technologies that I have heard is how do you actually extract precious metals out of e-waste using microbes. So there's a New Zealand company doing it. NUS is also actually working on it. So there's a lot of interesting things that are actually happening within Singapore itself in sustainability, which go beyond just consumer products.
Oh, and anyone else like to add anything? Okay, if not, then we'll move on to the next question. So, for Laura, can you elaborate on plans to extend the toilet roll community, and how will such collections be held if you do plan to expand the toilet roll community?
Okay. I think a lot of people ask me this question. This year I'm having my A-levels, so my plan is actually to focus on my A-levels first and to continue the collections that I currently have. And right after my A-levels, on the day I end, I'm going to approach more schools and more communities, especially a lot of NGOs in Singapore. Hopefully they can join me in this collection as well. And definitely, toilet rolls are actually just an emblem of the circular economy, something that we look upon with disdain can be turned into something so much more valuable in society, whether it's economic value or social value. So just now we talked about e-waste, and actually that's one of the sectors that I really want to go into as well, because I feel that e-waste has a lot of potential, especially because of all the semiconductors inside, and they actually can be recycled. And I think we brought the idea also about how can we incentivize businesses to ride on the wave of environmentalism and sustainability. And I think one of the most important ways is to ensure that the products that they produce are of economic value. And if you look at e-waste, they are actually quite economically valuable, and it can be turned into a lot of other products, e-products as well. And that's something I believe the government has also been pushing for. So with demand, with supply, and with support from the government, I think this is a very meaningful and definitely optimistic trend that we can look forward to. Yeah.
Okay, so I think a few more questions. So one of the questions that we prepared is that other than raising awareness from project group works and recycling initiatives, how can like governments or businesses help to inoculate a habit of people recycling their goods?
Ryan, sorry, can you say that again, please?
Okay, sorry. So other than raising awareness through project work groups and recycling initiatives, do you think the government and businesses have a role to play to inculcate a habit of people recycling their goods, other than just buying sustainable goods?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can start on it. So I always prefer examples because they're real. One of the ways, one of the problems we got started in Green Collective to tackle during the circuit breaker last year was we realized that as everyone was on Instagram baking away to glory and making sourdough breads, and we realized a lot of people have started cooking at home, and that led to an increased food waste. And that was a great point because they were doing two things. One was they were generating a lot of food waste. On the other hand, a lot of people were taking up gardening. And there's a bridge between the two, start composting. So we actually got a lot of people to start composting themselves. Now, yes, as a business, we had a product which could fit into a Singaporean house setting, which could help in composting easily because composting is tricky, right? So we had been working on it with an Australian company for some time, and we finally found a product which could work in an HDB kitchen. That was the whole aim, right? However, what we did alongside, apart from the product and going to people, was that we created a community because we realized that a lot of the people were actually doing this for the first time. So we created a Facebook group called the Composting Kampung, and that actually has grown much more than our sales of the composter has grown, to be honest, which is very, very heartening. And I'm very happy to see that because it has a lot of people who have developed buckets on their own. So it's not just about products which are like, I would say, white goods and all, but this is a clear case of how you can actually get the community to start doing things on their own. And I think this effort is definitely accelerating at a very rapid pace as community kitchens, community gardens are coming up. A lot of awareness is increasing, and a lot of people are looking, especially with the 30 by 30, a lot of people are actually incentivized and hearing much more about how they can grow herbs. And we are working very actively in that direction to teach people how to do this. It's a whole science on behavioral change. And that's something personally I focus on a lot with Green Collective, that we shouldn't be pushing products to people. Our whole objective as organization, as mission-driven organization, is to actually to be able to cause a behavioral change. And if we don't think of solutions as behavioral change, there is actually no difference between a commercial seller of products and us. There is no mission to us. And that is what has to be at the core, but it can definitely be done.
I guess I can cover a bit about the food waste part as well. I mean, I'm planning to introduce the next piece of legislation, which would be the Good Samaritan's Food Donation Act. And that really is to help to increase donation of food and obviously then a reduction in food waste. The public consultations hopefully will start soon. It'll be hopefully by the end of this month, which is a couple of weeks. And then we get some public feedback before I hope to introduce this bill in Parliament, maybe next year. In terms of recycling, I think honestly there's been way too much emphasis on recycling. As I've been sharing again in Parliament, we sort of forgot the first few R's, which is to reduce and reuse first. And if we keep talking about recycling, I see a lot of people are just saying they recycle and that's their environmental protection already. whereas in the first place, we really need to reduce. So it's same as the plastic bag issue, a single-use bag. We need to reduce rather than focus on replacing or recycling it.
Laura, anything to add on?
I think I really wanted to point out what MP Lewis pointed out about the reusing thing, because I think if we started reducing the amount of waste we produce in the first place, we don't even need to recycle. If we use toilet rolls without the core inside, then we don't even need to recycle them. And I think like when I first started my initiative, I actually tried to approach like companies that produce these toilet rolls to ask them whether they can just remove the core, because actually in China, they don't even have the core inside. So definitely I did not receive any reply, and there's also definitely a function to the core inside to ensure that it's stable, etc. But I think that this just proves the point that if we are able to take these very small steps from a business perspective to cut the amount of waste that we actually produce in the first place, then it actually goes a long way, because you really cut the amount of carbon emissions along the way. Because as you go down the manufacturing chain, you're going to produce more and more carbon, greenhouse gases, etc. Yeah.
Okay, so we're kind of running out of time, so this is probably the last few questions. So firstly, from Mr. Ng, so how successful has ICRAS been in promoting an awareness about protection of animals, especially since in Singapore we don't really see these animals that much?
I guess success is very hard to define here. But as I always tell my team, I mean, I've stepped back from ACRES now, but my ultimate hope is that before I die, there wouldn't be a need for our rescue center. So our success really isn't the number of animals we rescue. In fact, every year we rescue more, and I said that actually shows that we're failing a fair bit, that we need to rescue more and more animals. But if I would say success, I would see it then in the sense of that we've raised a fair bit of awareness now, where when I started, well, 20 years ago, well, animal welfare was really at its infancy stage. There's very little media coverage. Very few people spoke up about it. Never spoke about in Parliament till today, where every little bit of animal abuse or people picking up animals at the intertidal zone, there's a huge outcry, and that's a positive sign of that people now want to speak up about it, and more importantly, they want to take action. And that I would say would be a success in terms of, again, changing that mindset of our society.
Mr. Singh and Laura, do you have anything to add on? If not, move on to the final question. Okay, so finally, it's a rather more interesting question. So, do you think it is feasible for Singapore to make use of nuclear power plants to generate cleaner forms of energy?
Okay, I mean, we discussed this in Parliament a little bit, but I don't think we can ever rule that out completely. So there's always room to explore things, but that's a huge danger because of how small we are. Any small accident could wipe out this entire island. So while that can't be eliminated, our focus really is on finding alternative sources of energy. So as we shared, we're focusing quite a fair bit on solar. The solar deployment is really going out in full force. We're even thinking of importing solar energy from other countries. So we are trying to reduce emissions in that sense and focusing on green energy. But as always, there's a drawback. Again, as I raised my concerns in Parliament, where we're thinking of importing hydro electricity from Laos. That sounds very green, right? You don't burn any fossil fuel, but it might harm the habitat of the animals there, where a large part of the forest might have to be destroyed to build those dams. And again, while it sounds green, we need to make sure that it truly is green. And we don't want to say we import green energy when actually it harms the environment in another country. But that is our ultimate goal. Again, it's part of our big plans to how we can reduce emissions. But again, as I shared with all this, the biggest push has to be on how we can reduce. And that's why we're pushing on the more energy efficient appliances so that we can reduce our energy needs rather than finding replacement or even now recycling some of this energy.
I agree. I actually feel that it's all about a CBA, a cost benefit analysis. We weigh the risks and also the opportunities that we can gain from using certain forms of energy sources. And technology has actually endowed us with a lot of alternatives as well, be it solar, hydro, etc. And I think it's always about finding the technology that is best suited for the nation. So just to raise an example that is totally unrelated to the environment, but okay, the ethical dilemma about embryonic stem cells was actually we could actually like avoid the ethical dilemma because there are stuff like induced pluripotent stem cells. So this is just an example of how alternative forms of technology can actually empower us to make better choices for our country. Yeah, so this is just the point that I wanted to bring across.
Mr. Singh, would you like to add?
Yeah, as an ex-energy analyst, that's how I started my career, and living in a household where energy is talked about a lot because my wife works on energy investments on sustainability. Nuclear is great, but a lot of countries, and it's not just Singapore, are still evaluating it. And still evaluating it not just as a form of whether it's a good energy source and all, that's not a confusion. But like what Minister was talking about, right? When you have to do the life cycle assessment, these things are still not proven to be life cycle assessment positive for the environment. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of things going on. There's also a case of using hydrogen as a fuel and other things, right? So there are a lot of technologies that are being developed, and that is where sometimes I think we think that Singapore is not taking a decision, but there's a reason behind it. So these are things in motion. The world is moving fast on sustainability, but there are certain things where technologies do take time. So that's how I would say that it's of course feasible to do that, and there are very capable people at handling that part. But a lot of the things that we might read just by a Google article might not give you the best picture. The one thing I also wanted to say in this context, because I get this question a lot when I'm in forums which are not in Singapore, and I wanted to say this because I'm hoping there's a lot of youth in this. Sustainability, circularity is a hyper-local solution. What works for Singapore should fit into Singapore's system. And it's not about copy pasting what works in Europe. No system has got it right, believe me, right? So you should be very confident. You should study your own system, and what fits in that system should be the solution for that system. And we don't need to copy paste from anywhere else. So that's something I wanted to say, because when we can very easily get influenced, and believe me, we all do. We get influenced by a lot of press and all that we read. It's great to learn about concepts, but it's very important to know what our system is and how efficient it is, how we can make that better, and how will new solutions fit into that system.
See, enjoy your peace, Laura, while you have it. I never said that.
Okay, so finally, our last question for this panel discussion will be something about the 4Rs, which is the reduce, reuse, recycle, and of course the final R, which is refuse. So from what I've learned is that not many of the public know of this 4th R. So would you like to explain more about it and how it may relate to both the public, businesses, and in general everyone?
Well, I guess it's really what all of us has been stressing. That the first point really is to refuse. If we don't need it, we don't need to use it. And that will be the biggest change that this planet needs, rather than we focus again on recycling or replacing the items. And I always say when we replace it, it's just slowing down the inevitable. You want to start singing, Katie? No. Okay. But as I stress, and when I speak to especially the young kids, when you talk about protecting the planet, just talk about recycling. So that has been my fear, that we have focused so much on recycling that everybody feels that that's the game changer. And again, that's why I stress when we talk about plastic recycling, for example, last time, many didn't realize how recycling actually was going all the way up to China. And in the end, something that we thought was saving the environment was harming the environment. And so China stopped accepting the imports of plastic waste. And we realize actually, again, if you look at counting the amount of carbon to just recycle the plastic, it would have been better to just burn it in Singapore and generate energy out of it. And so that's the biggest, push that I think that we should focus on, and how we can really reduce or perhaps refuse using items that we don't need to. And so I'll end with the same thing, the plastic bag. And that's why we're not saying ban plastic bags in Singapore. But I think with a charge, people would think about whether they need the plastic bag. And I do this with everyone, and everyone would say the same thing. When your cashier double bags your item, everybody will say, but because the cashier did it. I didn't ask the cashier to do it. But now when I say it's 10 cents per bag, will you tell the cashier to stop? And everyone will say, yes, I will tell them, no need to double bag. One bag is enough really. And that's the change that we want now. If we can refuse the plastic bag if we don't need it, take as little as we need, and then recycle the plastic, we use it for a rubbish bag at the end of the day.
I think for the application to ToiletRollSG, I raised the example of the toilet roll call before, and that's actually how businesses can actually do their small part to reduce the amount of materials that they use for their packaging, etc. And that's when we talked about the extended responsibility of the producer. And I think another point that I really want to bring across is that it really takes a lot of courage to refuse something, especially in a social climate where I think, like, contrary to what we think, there's actually a lot of stigma attached to when I tell someone at the cashier or when I buy Liho, I say, I don't want a straw, I don't want a plastic bag. A lot of people might think that, why you give the person so much trouble? The person has to take out a plastic bag for you again, then take out the straw again. And that's why I say that it really takes a lot of courage to actually not just tell the person at the cashier to not give you the plastic bag, but also the friends around you, because there's also a lot of social pressure around this. Yeah.
I think my point, I think it's an extension of what both Laura and Mr. said, that very simply, because I can see some more questions on where do you start on going green. So I'll answer that as well in this question. It's very recently I had a debate with someone I don't know on LinkedIn about it. Sustainability is about identifying what you need versus want, right? It's our wants which tend to generate a lot of waste, honestly. So if you actually identify your needs and what are the key things that you need around you, your friends, your family, the key thing that you really like, it could be anything, right? And try to carve out a life for yourself around those things. It has a lot of personal fulfillment with that as well, which comes as a freebie. So reducing in the refusing part is just so important, because actually that is the toughest thing to do. We have to acknowledge that is the toughest thing to do, because the way our society has developed, the way we have all developed, it's about consumption, right? We are in the middle of an online Great Singapore sale happening on some online platform. Right? Buy, 50% off, 25% off. Get this headphone because it's fallen down from $76 to $25. We live in this world, but if you can hold your own, you will be a better human being overall. And that is where I think sustainability journey is actually very, very integral to personal journeys for a lot of people. I can give you a very good example of the founder of Unpacked, and how she gave this example in a panel discussion we were in together. And she talked about how with her daughter, she gives her money for the needs, but not for the wants. And the wants is something that she has to identify, and she would get it once a quarter or once in 1 month. So these are very, very simple things to do, but it can be done. Like on the plastic bagging problem in NTUC, right? If you look at it, and if you guys have traveled to Europe, it's actually a problem of design actually. In Europe, in most cases, there is the cashier sitting who slides your products after scanning it, and you need to bag it. In NTUC, the cashier actually bags it as well. So it's actually a design issue that exists. So if you were to relook at the design of how the bagging happens, and if I'm sure a lot of people will start bringing in their own bags. However, we have to acknowledge, how do we change our current system, which goes back to what I was saying earlier. And that's why what Mr. is saying is so, so important. that we need to do these nudges so that people start changing behavior and start reducing, refusing. And that is the initial starting point for all of us.
I would like to raise the point on identity, because I think the easiest way to start for those who really want to go green is to identify who you are in society and how you can actually contribute. So let's say I'm a member of the public. What can I do? What can I start from my consumer habits, from my recycling, reducing, reusing, all the 4 Rs? If I were a business, can I make it more environmentally friendly, more sustainable? So I think it's from these perspectives that we consider how we can contribute, because it's important to realize that walking towards a zero waste nation is not something that can be done by one person or one environment, one company, or like one government. It really takes a collective effort.
Okay, so anyone like to add on? Okay, if not, so thank you, Mr. Singh and Ms. Lee for insightful answers. So with that, we have come to our end to our panel discussion. So we would like to once again thank Mr. Mr. Singh and Ms. Lee for taking time off your busy schedules to attend this event. And we would also like to thank everyone for coming. And we hope that through this, you have learned a little bit more about what we can do for the environment.
Thank you for organizing this.
Thanks a lot for organizing and having us.